Caleb Williams was a highly sought-after quarterback prospect out of Washington, D.C. When he verbally committed to Oklahoma and fourth-year head coach Lincoln Riley in the summer of 2020, Sooner fans expected the usual result when a five-star quarterback joins a blue blood program. Success, trophies, and maybe most importantly, validation. All those things happened for Riley and Williams in Los Angeles. Because not only did the head coach leave Norman in a stunner, but thanks to a sea change in college sports rules, his star player bailed with him, birthing the first of what's likely to be many college football transfer portal beefs. Lincoln Riley played quarterback at Texas Tech under air raid legend Mike Leach. That makes him about as offense-friendly as you can get in American football. Later on as a play caller, he was handpicked by legendary Oklahoma head coach Bob Stoops to replace him in 2017. It was a good move at first. Riley led OU to 3 consecutive 12-2 seasons and 3 college football playoff berths. OU was knocked out in the semifinals every time, but they were undoubtedly a program on the cusp of a title. Hence the excitement about a commit like Caleb Williams. The DC native was a nationally sought-after recruit in 2020 with interest from across the sport. He committed to the Sooners because of Riley's QB-friendly offensive system and the chance to put up big stats and compete for titles. The other reason, hell, the real reason why Williams went to Norman, Oklahoma? In Riley's 4 years as a head coach, 2 of his quarterbacks, Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, both won the Heisman Trophy and were drafted first overall. And the third, Jalen Hurts, was a Heisman runner-up and drafted in the second round. That is nuts. And it might be worth mentioning all 3 of those quarterbacks were transfers to Oklahoma, not recruits. All 3 were at different schools before electing to transfer and sit out a season of eligibility under the old NCAA rules to play for Riley at OU. Mayfield even came from Texas Tech, Riley's own alma mater. Clearly, the man has a preference for shopping off of other teams' rosters. From the start, Williams and his family approached his college football career with a sober, business-like demeanor focused on the best way to get him to the pros. Tradition, regionality, and loyalty weren't paramount to the player, but that's a way of life in Norman. By 2020, Oklahoma was something of an annual guaranteed winner in the Big 12 Conference. Arch rival Texas sucked up way more of the spotlight, but OU was automatic. They'd won the Big 12 title the most times since its creation in 1996, including 8 out of the last 10 seasons. But while Riley's OU had no trouble dominating its own league, the Sooner brand was something of a punchline in the national picture. Stoops won a BCS national championship in January of 2001, but since that one win, the program went 0-3 in BCS championship games and posted a winless run in the new college football playoff format. Not to mention that the league OU dominated so often was, at least in the eyes of its administration, holding them back. College football was undergoing a massive shift that was still hidden from the public as the 2 conferences with the best TV deals and the most revenue, the SEC and the Big Ten, started to gobble up blue blood programs from other weaker conferences. OU wanted to move to the SEC to gain more money and more exposure and keep pace with programs like LSU and Georgia, who'd both beaten Oklahoma in the playoff and won national titles. In January of 2021, news broke that Oklahoma and Texas were making plans to leave the Big 12 and join the SEC. Depending on who you asked, Riley didn't want to make the move from the inarguably easier Big 12, where OU had a clean path to a playoff spot almost every year, to the cutthroat, brutal SEC, where teams routinely knocked each other out of contention for one of only 4 postseason spots. So, maybe the Sooners should have seen it coming when, on November 28, 2021, Lincoln Riley was hired away from Oklahoma by the University of Southern California. This was a shocking moment in college football, as most folks assumed Riley was as much of an OU lifer as you could expect. The last time an Oklahoma football coach left for another college head coaching job was 1947. The school hadn't run a coaching search for an outside candidate since 2000. So, to be fair, this fan base was not used to this at all, and it really showed. One Oklahoma paper reported that Lincoln jumped almost 100 spots in the most popular names for boys born in the state in the previous 5 years. Sooner fans engaged in an initial round of standard college football fan outrage. Campus banners called Riley a traitor, as the man who was supposed to lead OU to a national title went from folk hero to public enemy. While Riley offered a cheesy ode to OU fans at his Southern California hiring press conference, in December of 2021, the Oklahoma legislature named a desolate part of a state highway after Riley to create, quote, a proper goodbye. Honestly, though, this was all paint-by-numbers, angry college football fan behavior. Oklahoma looked silly and jealous and scorned, but that was to be expected. Then, Williams entered the NCAA's new transfer portal in January of 2022. And suddenly, with his QB kingmaker coach gone to LA, a new kind of panic set in around Norman. Starting in 2018, the NCAA updated the transfer rules for players, and now any player could enter the transfer portal without having to sit out a season, meaning that when coaches got fired, or they left, team rosters would likely disassemble to some degree thanks to this new move towards players' rights. Williams wasn't bound to Oklahoma on paper, which was convenient because he was never emotionally bound to them anyway. He just wanted to be developed into a pro. After he was quickly hired, new Oklahoma head coach Brent Venables claimed he'd be surprised if Williams left Oklahoma. Local media believed that Williams would stay too. And for a brief 2 months after Riley's departure, the new OU staff made a very public effort of keeping their blue-chip QB. Maybe it was unwarranted confidence or just badly conceived PR, but when Williams officially committed to USC on February 1st, the end of his one-season career at OU crushed a college football fan base in a very specific, first-of-its-kind way. Not only had Oklahoma lost their head coach and assumed dynasty architect, but he snatched their best player with him, along with a few others. But Williams wanted NFL quarterback development, and no one's track record was better than Riley's. Months after the transfer, his dad repeated that sentiment to the press. The PR machine of Los Angeles was also a huge draw for him to build his brand, and USC boosters ponied up big for Williams in NIL endorsement deals. NIL is name, image, and likeness, another new rule that allowed college football players to profit off of their likeness without getting into NCAA trouble. Compared to the Trojans, OU hadn't seen the coming change in the sport quite the same way, at least at that point. And this is where our story could have ended, with OU fans looking bitter because Riley, and in turn Williams, saw a higher ceiling for themselves at USC. But anytime a college coach makes a big job move, he spends his first offseason on a big media tour with a bunch of friendly outlets explaining how it's not that at all. It's about passion or chasing a dream, which is all just a bad attempt to hide the obvious fact that the coach jumped schools to chase money and personal success and fame, not to better young minds. And once he got to SC, Lincoln Riley could not stop talking. First, he tried to apologize to Oklahoma in the Players Tribune. That didn't go well, probably because the bulk of the piece focused on how much more appealing the USC job was to Riley. In that same PR campaign, Riley claimed that Oklahoma could not recruit as well as other title contenders could. Except that Oklahoma was a title-winning powerhouse with a national name before and during his time. Stoops, who had once hired Riley to Oklahoma as an assistant, fired back that, quote, Lincoln Riley didn't invent OU football. Riley, again, still talking, told TV host Graham Bessinger that OU fans tried to break into his house after he took the USC job, and that they obtained his family's cell numbers and delivered threats. Look, that's horrible and inexcusable, even in the world of oft-overboard fan behavior college football fosters. Except, according to multiple reports after he made those claims, no one has a record of a home invasion, including the Norman, Oklahoma police. Lincoln wouldn't respond to follow-up questions about it either. Luckily, Riley's on-field work spoke louder in his debut season. USC stormed back to national relevance, finishing 11-3, while Oklahoma struggled in 2022, finishing 6-7 in an obvious rebuilding campaign. And Riley extended that insane streak of creating Heisman quarterbacks when Williams won the award that December. But just like Riley's good but not great seasons by OU standards, USC lost twice to Utah in 22. including in the Pac-12 title game. Then, the Trojans were thumped by underdog Tulane in the Cotton Bowl. Things started to look more familiar in 2023. In their last Big 12 season before going to the SEC that Riley supposedly avoided, Oklahoma returned to prominence, finishing 10-3, including an upset of arch-rival Texas. And just as important, Venables became the recruiter Riley alleged was impossible at Oklahoma. What previously seemed like sour grapes from OU fans suddenly looked a lot more factual as Oklahoma started landing premier talent. Perception also shifted when the Trojans fell apart. Even with Williams trying for back-to-back Heismans, USC finished 8-5. Lincoln struggled in the LA spotlight, too. He made national news for trying to ban a reporter from practice. He was heavily criticized for hanging on to his embattled defensive coordinator for too long. And after USC was beat up by Oregon, Riley jawed in the stadium tunnel with an OU fan who apparently attended the game in Oregon and made sure to tape themselves heckling their old coach. As you can see, it got his attention.
Boomer Sooner, you traitor!
At many moments, the job and the Los Angeles-sized stage looked too big for a guy who sought exactly that out. After his college career ended, Caleb Williams mended fences with Oklahoma in a way that Riley couldn't. Williams went number 1 overall in the 2024 NFL Draft, but along the way, he made it a point to embrace Oklahoma and its fan base. After a blog site aggregated a story with a headline that made it seem like OU fans drove Williams to LA, Williams jumped on Twitter to correct that idea immediately. He also told the media he cherished his time at OU and offered a, quote, horns down for life as a jab at rival Texas. Until someone wins a championship, or doesn't, Riley and Oklahoma will always keep company, whether they're talking about each other or not. In June of 2024, USC canceled a future series of non-conference games against an SEC opponent, Ole Miss. And OU fans jumped on the narrative that Riley was once again afraid to play the SEC. A month later, Oklahoma officially moved to the Southeastern Conference while riding high in recruiting. At the televised celebration event, their athletic director, Joe Castiglione, took a not-so-veiled jab at Riley about coaches who wanted to compete in the SEC still being in Norman. I will tell you, without reservation, every coach that we talked to was excited, referring to the SEC move. And you know what? The ones who aren't here anymore. You either gotta accept it or not. This is Oklahoma. Get with it or get on with it. Riley was immediately asked about the comments, and for one of the first times since leaving Oklahoma, he didn't want to talk about it. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. And did you know that Secret Base has a Patreon? Check out these names. These are some people who have subscribed, and they get exclusive videos, podcasts, early access, all kinds of cool stuff with Secret Base. So for just a couple bucks a month, you can join these amazing people.